Hi, everyone. Hi, Rolando. Hi, Eddie. It's nice to see your faces on Zoom.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
That is how we're recording things these days. I have a question for you guys. Would you qualify your guys as Trekkies?
I am not a Trekkie. I'm a Fairweather Trekkie, by which I
Fairweather
mean
Trekkie.
I watch like the important episodes. I remember the important episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Now I
Of
used to
every version?
watch of most versions. I would say, yeah, because I liked Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine, was that Star Trek? Star
Yes.
Trek, right? Okay, it was.
Yes.
No, because I was confused. I think I always confused it with Babylon 5. There was a point in time where
That's
like
understandable.
these two series had numbers in them and they had to do with space, and they overlapped. I'm just like, whoa. Yeah. So yeah. But I'm not a Trekkie by any means. I can't,
Okay.
I'm not gonna drop Star Trek knowledge.
No. What about you, Eddie?
So I definitely enjoy the series, the franchise. I'm not so much of a Trekkie that I have like problems with like when things don't match up or in continuity and stuff like that. That
Mhm.
doesn't drive me crazy. I enjoy the characters, I enjoy the show, and I enjoy the whole optimistic look at the future.
Nice. Very well put. I am not a Trekkie. I have only watched the original series, and that was all I realized. I saw the J.J. Abrams revisionist films.
Reboots.
Reboots, yes. And after that, I just kind of like I didn't know anything about Deep Space Nine. I didn't know anything about Discovery. What is the other one?
Deep Space Nine, Discovery,
Voyager.
Voyager. And surprisingly, I didn't know anything about Next Gen until we were doing this episode. I am a
Interesting.
Fletchie. I'm not a Trekkie. I'm a Fletchie.
What's a Fletchie?
Fletchie is a diehard fan of Murder She Wrote.
Oh,
So
I didn't
JB
know that.
Fletcher. Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I don't know if it's a thing, but I'm making it happen. So the Fletchies unite, please call me. Even though I am not a Trekkie, I am really excited to talk about today's episode, which is the new CBS All Access show. Well, not new. It's been on for a couple of months, but we're back in the game after this pandemic hit us all by surprise.
We were planning to record this right before the pandemic.
We were.
like it hit. Like it was like that week, and we were going to be recording this with our guest of the day, right?
Our guest.
And then the world shut down, and then it's just like, okay,
Terrible. Yes.
And you know what? We saw this show, so now we're gonna still talk about it just because we did the work.
Mhm.
We did
It's
the
worth
work.
revisit, yeah. So let's go back in time about 4 months ago and discuss Star Trek Picard, the CBS All Access original show. It's not on CBS. It's just on All Access, right?
Yeah, it's just a CBS All Access exclusive.
Yes. A reboot of sorts, or just a continuation, which is
A
more so
revival.
a revival
Definitely a
of
revival.
Star Trek Next Generation.
Yes.
And we're,
Yes.
heads up, we're not talking about any of the films. We're just focusing on the TV show Next Generation and the TV show Picard.
With that said, I'm Rolando,
And I am Nicole,
and this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals
an original podcast.
about unoriginality. Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals. And it is just the three of us at the moment. We did say we were going to have a guest star. He may or may not show up right now. He's having some Wi-Fi issues. It is right now when we're recording 9 p.m. on a weekday. So we are exhausted. So it's just like, I can't wait forever. But if he ends up showing up, you'll know why there's an extra person all of a sudden. So we'll make sure we announce him if he shows up. But as they say in business, oh my God, these people, I'm like looking right across. This guy is like naked, just walking around his apartment.
That is what they say in show business, by the way.
Serious? Yeah, I'm not even kidding. Like right across, like what's it called? Like in my line of sight.
For our listeners who aren't seeing the video, we're all in a Zoom call. And Eddie and Rolando, who live together, they got the attention of naked ugly. What is it? Ugly naked guy? Is that a Friends reference?
Ugly naked guy. Yeah, in that
There you
window. He's not there anymore. Eddie.
Oh man!
Eddie.
Damn
came
it!
running.
Just like ugly naked guy. He's a fleeting glimpse.
Ugly. Yeah. I think it was fat ugly naked guy.
He was fat, ugly, naked guy. Really?
I think that was.
You're the Friends aficionado.
I think that if I remember correctly, that was a moniker. Fat Ugly Naked Guy.
Friends was a really problematic show, but what wasn't problematic was Star Trek.
Actually, the real Trek even was not problematic. So not that we need to know. Not that we need to know the. I was going to segue to.
We don't need to talk history about Star Trek. I don't think so.
No.
There's so many other podcasts and YouTube videos and documentaries that do it better, and we all know pretty much the basic gist of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
But I myself don't really know that much about Next Gen. I'm more of the original series. Spock, Kirk, the Scottish guy, Scotty. Was he Scottish?
He was Scottish.
Scotty?
Beam me up, Scotty.
Beam me up, Scotty. Like that kind of stuff. That's like the Star Trek that I know.
That was in Bones. Bones.
What? Wait, what? What's Bones?
Bones.
Doctor.
That was a doctor. He was a medical officer.
What was his nickname?
Yeah.
Bones.
Yeah.
Bones.
But we're not talking about the original series, so I'm kind of like trudging waters that I've never been through before. So I definitely need the help of you guys, a Fairweather Trekkie and a Trekkie.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do talk history, because the history is important to discuss this new Picard series.
History is not my forte, Nicole. I apologize.
It's totally cool.
Oh, man.
I won't be able to tell you much history other than probably the basics and stuff. But let's get to it. Let's talk a little bit of Star Trek Next Generation, which I argue is one of the best Star Trek iterations. I think it's better than the original for sure.
Okay, hold your horses on that.
It is. And I also think Captain Picard is easily I think a lot of fans agree he is the greatest captain of the entire franchise. Diplomatic, very, very. I wonder, not charismatic. Would you consider him charismatic? You guys have seen a few episodes at this point.
In his own way, but if you're gonna give congeniality awards, that goes to Kirk. Like
fair,
100%.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. No, he's more diplomatic. He's much more. I think he's just like a very noble person. And I mean, like, he is clearly someone who is about the rule of law, but like rule of law to benefit all mankind, right? Because he will still stand up against unjust laws that he feels. You know what I mean? So yes. I think he's just like a stand up like guy,
Mm-hmm.
So that is Picard and stuff, and that's just talk about the character. Let's not even talk about the history. But Eddie, do you know the history of Star Trek Next Generation?
In what sense?
Do you know when it came out?
I do.
You do.
So, well, for those who might
Nicole
not know, the original Star Trek series came out and lasted only for 3 seasons in the 60s. And Star Trek was essentially not really anything other than like an animated TV show and a couple of movies in the 70s until the creator, Eugene Roddenberry, or just Gene Roddenberry, decided to have a new generation of what is it, Starfleet? Of a captain and his
Enterprise.
His crew.
Enterprise is the ship. Starfleet
is the government.
It is the body of government.
Okay.
Military.
So that's kind of where Picard comes in, and the reason why Picard is so important is because he is the captain. His name is Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Wow, you didn't say it in your French accent.
Jean-Luc.
Jean-Luc Picard.
Jean-Luc Picard.
Uh-huh.
So that is who the character is. The Next Generation actually was much more successful than the original run of the Star Trek original series. The Next Generation lasted for 7 seasons.
Yeah, it came out in 1987, right?
Mm-hmm. And lasted till 1994.
94. Damn. Okay.
Yeah, and it really expanded the world of Star Trek.
Oh, we're getting a guest.
We're getting a guest. Here we go.
Someone's beaming in.
Oh my God.
That
was a great reference. He got beamed in. Yes. Lincoln, we were literally just talking about history and stuff. But for all our listeners, if you don't remember, Lincoln joined us when we talked about the
Watchmen.
Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the first episode of this year. Yes. I was gonna say, I don't know why I had it in my head the other HBO show, the Golden Compass, but I was just like, no, that's not right. That couldn't be it.
Yeah, no.
Although that was I like Golden Compass.
Oh, that was a good show. So yes, Lincoln, welcome back to Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
Thank you, guys.
Hey.
And with that said, Lincoln, we're actually talking history of Star Trek and stuff. Do you know the history behind Next Generation?
Yes.
Yes, do shed some light, because I myself am not really a Trekkie.
I mean,
so-
I'm not a Star Trek historian, but
Well,
Are you a Trekkie?
Yes.
There we go. So I defer to you for sure.
you definitely have more authority than us.
Yes.
What would you like to know?
Well, we're talking 1987, right? This is when the first so the first season launched in 1987, and then it would run on until 1994. Correct? Is that what we literally just said this? And then from that would also have a few spin-off movies. The first one being First Contact?
Generations.
Oh, Generations was
Generations.
first.
Generations,
All right.
yes.
So Generations, which was the movie that brought the original cast of Star Trek and then mixed them in with the new cast.
Yes.
Followed by then First Contact.
Mm-hmm.
And then followed by, was there 4 or Nemesis was the last one?
There were 4.
Oh, so what was the
First
one in between?
Contact, Insurrection.
Oh, Insurrection, that's right. And that was a Romulan movie. Oh, and then last was Star Trek Nemesis, which is infamous.
That's the Romulan.
Yes,
That's
this
a
is the
Romulan
important
Okay,
one.
Gotcha. It is an important one to the Picard story, which we'll get to
Yes.
later. But yeah, so really successful franchise overall, because the reason it was able to spin off 4 movies was because they were, for the most part, profitable. I think
Yes.
Nemesis was where... Was Nemesis profitable, or was it just...
No.
So
It
wasn't.
wasn't.
So it
It
wasn't
was a
profitable. And
Box
it was,
office and critical flop.
It was a critical flop, and it was so bad that, like, we will come to learn that, like, a lot of the cast was just like, nope, never again.
Yeah, a lot of them have horror stories
Although-
about working on it.
Although I thought that was a good movie, but it didn't make a lot at the box office.
So let's take it from there, and let's talk about some of these characters that Picard interacts with in Next Generation. Some of them are Riker, who I think is his first mate. Yes. We have
Number
Georgie
1.
LaForge, who is initially he's the ship's helmsman, but I think he gets promoted to an engineer.
Played by LeVar
Burton.
Thank you.
Yes.
And he had one of the best costumes. And it was so simple, right?
He
You just give
did.
him that eyepiece, and it just becomes iconic.
The visor.
Mm-hmm.
The visor, thank you. Which for me, as a kid, I remember growing up, I don't know why it used to terrify me a little, right? Because
Really?
I think because he was anytime he took it off, right? Because he was blind, and
Yeah,
it
he was
was
like Cyclops. Yeah.
it was scary. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, I have distinct memories of that growing up as a kid.
Uh.
Who else was on this ship?
We have Tasha Yar, another character.
Who?
Tasha
She was in
Yar.
the first season.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't even in the full first season.
Oh, I'm about to
See,
say,
there you
it's
go.
like you just sound familiar.
But she was memorable.
I'm just reading off a list.
She was memorable.
We have Worf, who is a Klingon,
Mhm.
who I really enjoyed him. He's very loyal and very, very good character.
Another one, great. I mean, let's just be real. Star Trek Next Generation had some of the best, I think, character designs that kind of would.
I think so.
They have longevity to them, right? Where I think the future iterations will try to experiment sometimes with the looks of these aliens and stuff that aren't as successful.
Yes.
I think Next Generation kind of had, because it stuck to a budget. They were a budgeted TV show.
They
And
were.
for
Yeah.
a show that had those restrictions. They were able to make this show look really, really high end.
Mm-hmm.
Even including the space travel and stuff. So
Yeah.
Which is what is very, I think, actually adds to the charm of the show. I think it's very charming how it's trying to make a lot out of very little. But to just go down the cast list a little bit, we have Deanna Troi, who's kind of a second favorite of mine.
and psychic,
Yeah,
an empath.
an
Yes.
empath. That's because she's half human and half Betazoid.
Gene Roddenberry was very involved with the beginning of this series and stuff. I think
Yes.
he
Yes. He was the one who hired everyone, essentially.
did he die in one of these seasons? Is that what happened, or did he just quit?
He died.
He did die.
He died
Okay.
during the Next Generation.
Okay, yeah.
He did not live to see Voyager.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
gotcha.
so
By that
that's
point, it was-
important.
by that point, it was Rick Berman and I can't remember the other guy. It was 2 guys. Rick Berman was one of them, and another guy who did Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and I believe Enterprise.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so this is one of the 2 shows that Gene Roddenberry personally worked on.
Right.
And I guess Wesley is another character, but an important character is Lieutenant Commander Data, and he is an android. He's pretty much the second officer to Picard, and he's a very important character in terms of everything we're talking about, I think, with the original Next Generation and then the Picard show, and even Nemesis, because something very important happens there. But before we get there,
fun fact though, Data was actually also, I think, my favorite character. And
really?
You know why? And this is going to be weird. So my dad had albinism, right? And there was like a similarity that Data had in terms of the skin tone to him, and there was just like a connection that I had instantly with that character. Weird, right? So no, I mean, my dad was just like, he was just like, he had no pigmentation, right? Which is not the same as just being like a pale white person. Like, it was like, it's different, right? And there was a similarity in terms of like, I mean, he's not gray like Data is, but there was like kind of, I saw similarities there as a kid. I used to watch a show with my dad, so.
True.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't list out my favorite character, and my favorite character is more of a recurring character. But I didn't watch a lot of episodes. Again, I like before you came on, Lincoln, I was saying that I'm really just an original series and the movies kind of a girl. So Next Gen has all been very like uncharted territory for me. But I watched. Stop judging. But I watched a couple of episodes, mainly to the suggestion of Eddie, who was like, "You got to focus on the Borg." And that introduced me to a character named Q, who I really liked.
Yes.
Such a dick.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's just like pretty much like, "Oh, you're not going to let me on your ship? Okay, so I'm going to show you what's really out there. Bam, here's the Borg. Fuck your life up." And those Borg episodes were intense.
Yeah, Borg episodes were very good. It was, again, another creation from this series that would have long-lasting effects throughout the rest of the franchise. Specifically those 90s franchises, but and now Picard. So yeah, but
Yes.
Borg,
Yes.
the fun
The Borg, I feel like, are also probably, like, at least with the Star Trek episodes that I've seen, the most fearsome of their enemies.
Yeah, they're
You
supposed
can't
to,
really
right?
defeat them. Yeah.
That would be right,
It's like, no way to.
because they can adapt, they learn, they are, they're just a collective.
They can't be
being.
reasoned with. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, there's just there is something utterly terrifying about them.
Well, actually, they can be reasoned with.
Oh,
and,
can they?
Yeah, and who did a really good job of that was Captain Janeway. She did a really good job of reasoning with them throughout Voyager. It all depends on. It's all about leverage, and because the Voyager, the Borg are not infallible. They're not, all knowing. So there are ways to get around them. So by the time they reach Voyager years, I mean, the Federation has a lot of experience at this point dealing with the Borg. So to in her credit, she does have that for her advantage versus Picard, who was the first person to really interact with the Borg.
So wait, I'm sorry. Is there a female captain for Voyager?
So yeah, I was gonna mention that
That's
Captain Jane. Captain Janeway is the first
Catherine
female.
Janeway.
Yeah, she's the first female
and
captain.
And only.
Oh, that's right. I guess even
until Discovery.
I was gonna say that. Yeah,
I was
because
gonna
Discovery
say,
she becomes.
Discovery seemed like.
Even Discovery, the captain was short lived. She died in pretty much the first couple episodes.
This is also true.
And was replaced by a man. So.
Oh jeez.
But to Discovery's credit, the lead actor, the lead star, is a female. Is a black female, to be quite honest. So even though she's not the captain, she's still, the show revolves around this black female. So don't think that because she's not the captain that it doesn't take.
Actually, yeah, you actually might be interested in Voyager. That's another, like, the 90s series of Star Trek are actually all pretty genuinely good, I would argue. I know that
people
I
did
think
not like it.
that's, I was going to say that, right? Like, there was a lot of backlash to Voyager, and I genuinely do believe it was sexism.
Yeah, I think a little bit of it was.
But no, I mean, this kind of like reiterates the fact though that like Star Trek has always been kind of a woke show, for lack of a better term. Like, it has always kind of really tried to. Gene Roddenberry always imagined a utopia, right, with Star Trek. That was always his goal and stuff. And I think that's one of the beauties of the Next Generation, right, where he was able to kind of expand on that idea of a utopia.
Interesting.
With like his characters and stuff. Like there's like races between like different species is a different story, but I'm talking about like when it came to like the human race, like there was no color, like, right? There was like no it was viewed differently, right? And it was kind of it's a beautiful thing, right? Like there's just no other way of saying it. And
so I would argue that though.
Oh,
honestly.
Yeah, so would I.
By all means. Oh, really? Whoa.
I mean,
maybe I'm still seeing it with rose-colored glasses from as a little kid.
Well, you're
I'll
right
admit
when
that.
you say Gene Roddenberry tried to create a utopia view of Star Trek, but keep in mind you're still talking about a modern day audience. So Star Trek Star Trek Next Generation works so well because you still had a white male lead.
Fair.
And mainly two white male leads if you count Riker as well.
Right.
And Worf was honestly a stereotypical black person. He was very angry, he was very aggressive, he was very big, he was very macho. It fit in a very stereotypical black role.
Interesting.
In a lot of ways. And the entire Klingon Empire really does step into a very stereotypical black perspective.
Okay.
It wasn't until Deep Space Nine where you had a black captain that I could say, okay, let's see how this rolls. But even still, it was surrounded by an all-white cast. You know what I mean? So it really, no matter how much you try to make a utopia, and I'm not trying to take away anything from Gene Roddenberry or Star Trek, because I get the idea and I get the premise, but we still have to understand that, and even as me as a comic book creator, I still, although I want to convey different voices and minority voices, I have to understand that there's still a white male audience that consumes this primarily. And at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones to determine if we're going to continue on for 5-7 seasons. Right?
True.
And so, yes, to your point, the underlying message is the utopian, everyone is equal, everyone's fair. But when it comes down to the actual delivery of the content, we have to still acknowledge the fact that it's still feeding the same narrative, no matter how you do it. And even Marina Sirtis even spoke to that as Deanna Troi, where she was complaining about her role and her depiction as the counselor.
For sure. Okay, fair enough. You guys, you it's true. You got me there. I have no counter argument to that. Yeah. But actually, let's talk a little bit more about Star Trek. Q, we just mentioned Q, right? Who I think is pivotal with the... Is he as pivotal to the Borg storyline, or is he just a pivotal to the Enterprise storyline?
I think he just...
storyline.
To the Borg storyline too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love the way that he's like kind of like the antagonist of, and enjoys being an antagonist of Picard, because Picard is always just so like put together, and he's always like, Q, get off my ship. I can't do Picard.
It's a very Batman Joker relationship that they have.
It is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's this weird kind of like dance that they continuously, I think, at least from what I saw, they do with each other.
Yes.
That makes it so intriguing as a villain. So I really appreciated Q, especially because like just like that, he showed them probably the most atrocious species in the universe. So
it's true. You failed to mention though my favorite recurring character, which was Guinan. Played by Guinan. Oh, I just used to call her Whoopies. Even that.
So Whoopi,
I still remember.
It's like,
oh my god, it's Whoopi. I have genuinely, honestly, such fond memories of when I took acid in New Orleans. Right, it was during Mardi Gras, but like there was a certain point where we got too scared. Towards the end of the night, like it's wearing off, and you just get scared because there's so much things going on the street. So we just kind of went back to the hotel room, and what do we end up watching? The episode where we first meet Q. Star Trek. It was playing on TV. And we
that's what I saw. Yeah,
we just ended up binging those for a few episodes. We were just playing on TV, and such fond memories of just watching the show. And that's also why I first realized, like, oh my god, it's Whoopi. I forgot she was in this show.
In that episode, though, she felt their presence. I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but the Borg wiped out her race.
Yes,
right?
They did.
Yeah.
And then Picard came to consult her about it and said, listen, you don't want to mess with these people. Don't even try. And he ignored her.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a very admirable quality in a captain, if I were to say so myself.
Go ahead.
If you put
I'm
the
gonna
lives
let
of everyone at your ship at risk just because you just want to keep on going, and somebody's literally telling you, "Hey, this wiped out my race, so maybe let's just like leave it alone."
So
Not the best option.
I mean, that's very typical human though, because I even in my personal experience, I tell people all the time, don't do that, and they just are like, oh well, I'll see what it is anyway. People do that regardless, right?
Yeah.
So that's number one. That's just human beings. Like we always think that we're different from the person who went through it. Number two, he's an explorer. So all Starfleet is about pursuing new life, making first contact, exploring the unknown,
No matter how many do not enter signs that there are, he's just going to keep going.
Which kind of hints to white supremacy in a little bit, or superiority complex, where it's like, well, even though you went through it, I'm going to do it and I can do it better, right?
That's pretty much how it came off.
Which is
it's
fair.
like, listen to her. Like, you consulted, but
and
whatever.
she's like 500 years old. Like, how?
Yeah, come on.
If I remember correctly, he didn't know that then when she did warn him. Like, she was still like even to this day, she's still kind of a mysteriously shrouded character.
Yes, she is.
He knew who she was. Like, he was very intimate with her. Like, he knew her story, her background.
When you say that, do you also think that the characters like had a thing? No? It's just me.
She would never. No.
Wait, first of all, who could turn down Jean-Luc Picard? He's actually very, very handsome and like very, very attractive.
Yeah, but she has like 100 kids already, so it's like
that's fair.
There you go. Yeah.
She's not beat.
Yeah.
She's older than everybody. So.
Which one of my favorite scenes is the first time that like Q and Guinan, Whoopi, the first time they like encounter each other, right? They're just like both like ready to fight, which is hilarious too because like Q's like this all-knowing being, and the fact that he's kind of like intimidated or even like scared of her says a lot about her character too. Yeah, interesting character, but yeah, let's.
Which goes back to Nicole's point, was like if Q's like taken aback by Guinan, why the hell are you not listening to this shit? Right? It's like
he's
the most
fucking
powerful
with you
being
with this,
in the universe is like, oh shit, you got like her on here, like, and you're just like, oh, I don't listen to her. Let me go ahead anyway. Like, come on.
Seriously.
Well, let's see if he learns his lesson, because in season 2 of Picard, she's coming.
That's what I heard.
Oh, that's right. I heard. Yes.
Oh, hey,
Yes.
that's nice.
Good. I'm glad. I want to see more Whoopi in my life.
That'd be cute.
And so that's going to be a good season to see how well they treat her, Do they still treat her as this sage that works in the bar? Or are they going to really see her as like this all-knowing, really respected person? Which is
a common trope, right? The magic black person.
Yeah, the black woman. The black woman who's just like, the nanny or the mammy in the background just whispering, "Hey, I don't think you should do it."
Yeah, why is she a bartender on the ship? Like, why is that her job?
Because she's a lone survivor.
Explain it.
Wait.
Did they give her the job? Did she
No.
volunteer for it? Did she want like something more calming?
It's her thing. She listens to people. Like her people.
Yeah, she's a
are
listener.
listeners.
So it's just a
So
bartender.
it's like the whole thing of
So
a
Deanna
bartender
Troy
listening
is
to
the counselor and she's the bartender. Okay.
Well, keep in mind, she never went to Starfleet. She, if you remember Generations, she was a refugee.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how she stumbled across the Federation, because they saved her from her ship.
I see.
Although I did wonder if she did get asked and she was just like, hell no, I'm busy with The View.
No,
he asked her on The View.
Picard came on The View and asked her.
No, wait, I didn't know that. Shut up.
I
told
you.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, wait, I genuinely did not know that it was on The View. Okay.
You're not listening to Eddie. Eddie is telling you.
Now I'm Picard.
So beautiful the way he did it.
Yeah, he did.
Aww.
Like, it was a very tear-jerking moment.
If we could find that on, that on
notes.
YouTube, yeah, we'll add that to show notes.
Yeah, we'll add it to
for
the
sure.
show notes,
That sounds like a very cute moment. But we are getting off topic. Let's talk about Star Trek Next Generation. Let's talk actually more about the Borg and Data and Picard, because this is all stuff that's important
it's
for
more so Data's relationship,
Picard.
especially also bordering into Nemesis, because I do think that the Picard series really takes off like it uses Nemesis as its kind of like playing field that it's going to have a relationship with. I didn't see Nemesis when I started the pilot. I had to stop the pilot and go back and find it because I didn't know a lot that was being referenced. Now, I know that Riker is technically the ship's first officer, but from what I saw, and I did not see a lot, I would say that Picard has more of a special relationship with Data, even though he's his second in command, right?
Well, yeah, and Data's also synthetic, right? Like, I think that's what they call it, right? Synthetics, synths. Okay. But
so you have to watch the series to really understand their relationship. I mean, Picard went to bed. It was a time when Data was going to be seen as property of Starfleet, and Picard had to serve as his kind of like lawyer and defend him as a sentient being.
Which is easily one of the best episodes of Star Trek.
Measure of the Man.
The Measure of a Man. Yes.
So that really solidified their relationship from that point on. You know, Picard had to really come to terms of who Data really was. Before, he didn't really look at Data like that. And then he had to really see that Data was more than just a machine. And he then advocated on his behalf to fight against Starfleet.
There's actually a very funny YouTube video available online in which lawyers critique that episode from like a legal standpoint.
Really?
to see is this argument valid? I won't spoil it because we're gonna add that to the show note for sure. But that is a very, very good. But that episode again. I think this is some of the other things that like is interesting with Star Trek, where sometimes they have like the space exploration, sometimes they have those space battles, sometimes they have those like phaser gun battles, right? But like a lot of Star Trek is also really good because of Jean-Luc Picard's monologuing. And he does a lot of monologuing throughout the show. But, like, the writers were really good in terms of, like, really giving him, like, really, really profound monologues. Where I think, because I would argue as, like, someone who wanted to be a screenwriter, like, that's the first thing you hear from teachers is, like, don't monologue. And he would usually go on these tangents, and they would usually still be very, very successful. I would say The Measure of Man has like some of the longest tangents because he's literally making a legal case as to why Data is not Starfleet property, but rather an actual officer.
I would also say that from what I've seen of Star Trek, of the original series and The Next Generation, there's something very theatrical about Star Trek. It doesn't want to kind of shy away. It's like it plays as like an adventure of the week show to me. Yeah. But it also makes it like if it was on the stage. And sometimes things become incredibly theatrical. And because they're dealing with like, I think Star Trek in its own way likes to deal with like issues. And it wants to speak to like a more contemporary mindset. That's when it has that nice blend between adventure and intellectual. Which also is done in a very kind of kitschy, moderate, like low budget way, which is also what's so fucking charming about Star Trek.
I actually do. Yeah, the low budget appeal does still, because it still holds up, I think. Rewatching it, I actually think it's just like, oh, you know what? Like the way the show is actually filmed, knowing their constraints, like they actually put a lot of thought though into the set design to kind of make this place feel like a real life lived in place. And focusing so much of your energy on the set design kind of gives the room a lot of breathing room in terms of like where some things actually do look kind of hokey. It doesn't matter though, because like the world itself feels real.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the major successes of the show.
One of the major issues I had, like one of the things that Marina and Jonathan Frakes has said about fans would say, why do all the aliens look humanoid? And then they joked was like, because we're still all human, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things I think had a critical flaw to it was the fact they did not have enough they did not put much into the aliens, into making them look alien. So if you ever see Babylon 5 did a great job of making aliens look like aliens.
Oh, they loved it, yeah.
You know, and that was really low budget, by the way. But they did a really great job in giving, you know, different alien looks to these aliens. And I thought that Star Trek Next Generation could have really done a better job. And even all the Star Trek, to be quite honest, could have really done a really better job at making aliens just look a little bit more alien.
But so my impression of Star Trek is that they kind of don't want to make them look very alien. They want to make them look as close to humans as possible. Kind of like with Vulcans and with Romulans. They have like messed up eyebrows, you know. They're like
And-
us,
or the
but with
ears,
different
yeah.
eyebrows or ears, you know.
Yeah,
So
but
it's
that's
like,
kind of. But I mean, I think that's anti-Star Trek at the same time, because you can't talk about we want to be respectful of diversity when everybody looks the same. You know.
well, not
I mean,
so much the same, but I think that from my point of view, it seems that they're trying to get across this point where it's like aliens and us aren't so different. Like that's also kind of like bridging like this whole equality message together that I think Star Trek tries at. I'm not saying that they always succeed at, but I think that that's why they're these alien creatures that we always come into contact with just look incredibly human.
I just think it's a budget issue. They spend.
I
more
could
money
also
on it.
be
I would
that.
agree. I think, no, I
It
think
could be that.
so. I actually think it's actually
But
not
they
just
do explain they do explain this a little bit in Star Trek. There's
What?
an episode where Picard finds an ancient artifact.
Oh, I know which one you're talking
It's
about.
a message from an
Where they
ancient
all-
civilization.
And the Klingons, Romulans, all and the Kardashians show up.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
the
the
idea is that the
Kardashians?
ancient civilization
Wait, Kardashians. Really?
they
That's what I
advanced,
heard.
they went out of space, and they realized that they were alone.
And they populated all the
So
other
they decided to like
Mm.
offer themselves as a seed to generate new life throughout
Yeah.
the galaxy.
Oh my god, like Prometheus.
So so the idea is that they were
that
like
movie.
they were like the beginning,
Don't like that.
Yeah.
movie.
and because they were the
a
beginning,
cop
that's
out.
why we're all. No, it's true.
Well, I
No,
was,
no. He's right. There was an episode that did exactly that, and I thought that the episode was a cop out. I thought it was an easy way to just say we don't have the budget to make everybody look different, so this is what we're going to explain it.
I genuinely think it's budget, but I also do think it's also at the same time almost homage to the original one, where like they were also working on a constrained budget and everything ends up looking humanoid with just like either some like paint on it or
Yeah.
some like
Yeah.
extra hairy parts.
Yeah.
You know, that's about it, which I think is fine. Like that is part of the appeal. Keep in mind, Babylon 5 had to kind of create its own voice, basically, right? And if Star Trek is doing like the kind of humanoid looking monsters, I think that's a complaint that I also have with some of the shows that are put out even nowadays, where like every monster of the week still looks like just a person wearing like a piece of prosthetic, right?
Yeah.
And but I was also going to mention though, I just realizing talking about this, I just really kind of missed the 90s and early aughts versions of low budget sci-fi on TV, because that's something that isn't really done anymore, right? Like
No, not at all.
Doctor Who.
Oh, Doctor Who still tries to do that. All right, that's good. That's kind of all right. Maybe I will check it out. I know that you love that show, but I'm not. There is something kind of endearing about those
There is.
properties, which is probably actually why Star Trek, the original one, is still like beloved, because it is.
Well, because it's also not so much about the glitz and the glamour of space and, everything that they go through. It's more so the stories. And that's the one thing that I think Star Trek tries at, and sometimes it does succeed, is that it tries to really always maintain its heart. That Picard has so much love for his crew and the relationship that he has with them, that it's really at the end of the day, like, it's all about the heart. Which was, I don't know, like, and I'm not trying to segue this early into the new one, but I kind of felt that was lacking from Picard.
Did you?
I don't agree.
I can't wait for
Me
us to
personally,
get into this
I
argument.
did. So,
But I will agree with you though. There was also, it wasn't just the love that Picard had for his crew. The crew had this also
oh yeah, no, they
major love for him. I think one of the best episodes is easily the one where Jean-Luc becomes a Borg.
A Borg, yeah.
And now I think that episode is actually smart because it's not all really told from the point of view of Captain Picard. Most of the episodes actually told from the point of view of Riker, and the fact that, like, he is considering, like, trying to, put in the paperwork so he could become a captain, right?
Yeah, and that woman trying to take his job.
Yes. Oh, that's the other thing, right? So he was dealing with those old internal politics. But I think what made that episode so good was the fact that he got thrown into this fucking shit show because, like, fucking Picard was a Borg. Again, smart one. And that episode obviously has major ramifications for Captain Picard because now
that experience is gonna ripple out.
Mm-hmm.
Not only from the Enterprise, but how people relate with him. Like in Deep Space Nine, the commander of Deep Space Nine was affected by what Picard did when he was a Borg.
Wow.
And even now, that trauma is gonna lead to what we have right now, Picard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get into Picard. So Picard takes place
20 years after Nemesis.
20. Okay, thank you. I actually didn't know that specific. I was going to actually say Is that how long it was since the movie? Like also?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think so.
It was about 18, 19 years.
Okay, gotcha. All right, cool. Cool.
And at the end of Nemesis,
yes, I was
going to say that.
That's what I was going to say. So wait, you guys remember Nemesis probably better than I do, but I remember basically the end of Nemesis that we know is that Data dies. He sacrifices his life so that way Jean-Luc Picard can live and continue to be a captain. And he would go on to be an admiral. Am I making that up? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm all right. I was about to say, it's just like I could have been making all that stuff up. And by the time we get to Picard, as you guys mentioned, 20 years after the events of Nemesis, he is now retired. And we find out that he kind of retired for, I don't know, is scandal the right word? What would you guys describe it?
It wasn't a scandal.
I wouldn't describe it as a scandal.
He resigned.
It's disgrace, though.
Political.
No, it wasn't disgrace.
It was kind of a disgrace.
No, it wasn't disgrace.
It kind of, well, it
was an ultimatum.
Like it was.
Yeah.
He made an ultimatum. He said Starfleet does not live up to their ideals and continue with the rescue of the Romulan people. He no longer feels that he can be part of Starfleet. So either do this or take my resignation. And they took his resignation.
Which is so this is actually one of the interesting things about like why the show was kind of a little bit timely. It's almost a critique on the Trump administration where you have a lot of these like officials who have I'm not even kidding, right? You have a lot of officials who've been in the office for so long and stuff, and they don't have the fortitude that like Picard's character does. And obviously it's a fictional character, you know, but like this is kind of what's it called? It's a critique on that. The fact that like, you know, like, you know, you have like this president who's running the country amok and stuff, and you have these people who can stand up to him, but they won't because they're cowards. Where Picard tried to do that, but we see that at the same time that the system will get you. You know, they took his ultimatum. They're like, all right, well, you're fired. So yes, so he retires.
Fired. He resigns.
He resigns, or you know, it's similar to what happened to that. What's it called? The district attorney this week, you know.
And I just want to preface that because we can't assume that Starfleet was wrong and Picard was right, and it's easy for us to say that because we know Picard and we don't really know Starfleet, right? And we understand the way it was written, but the reality is that, and I think one of the admirals made this point was like, this is bigger than just how you feel about the Romulans, right? And it's more to it than that. And it's always, and I just want people to understand that in life, just as in the story of Picard, there's always more to it than just how you feel in this moment. Even if you are justified in your belief, and even if your belief is morally acceptable or correct, there's so much other parts and layers to the story that sometimes you don't just not aware of, and that you're just not privy to. And that the decision makers are.
So that's interesting, right? Because by that take, the beginning of the show is almost an indictment of Picard's idealism. Yes. It starts off that way. It will not end that way. Spoiler, guys. But there is an indictment to the kind of idealism that like Picard does represent, because I would say that is the shtick that is Picard, an idealism. And he's a glorified hero in that sense. And I think the show always has done a good job of kind of making him that. But at the beginning, by the time we begin with Picard, he is now not a shell of a man, but he is a shell of his former self, right? The former glory that he was, despite the fact that he does still have these high ideals. And it is because of like his ideals that he kind of gets swept up into this adventure that he falls into. Eddie or Lincoln, do you guys want to give like a quick summary of what that adventure is? Because it is a lot more complicated. No, I'll try to summarize it if anything. Or Nicole, from what you saw.
No, you can do it.
No, all right, fine. So more or less what Picard discovers is that Data has potentially 2 daughters out in space somewhere. I don't know why they were surprised that like she's in space, because like, you know, all the space travel they've done on their careers. But like she's out there somewhere. And so Picard decides he's going to try to save one of them because he witnessed one of the daughters die before his very eyes. She was killed by Romulan secret police, basically, right?
Yes.
who are out trying to kill all synthetics. And along the way, it kind of falls into like the Western. It kind of feels like a little bit of Western at certain times, right? Where you're picking up all these people to go on your adventure and stuff while you guys travel. So every episode is kind of like you're picking up someone new, and you're still trying to achieve a greater goal, but like you need these people to help you out, so you're gonna help them out first, right? It feels like very Dungeons and Dragons-y too in that sense. And then they come to discover that there is an entire conclave of these synthetics who have been hiding out for generations, right? Thousands of years, almost, something like that. I could be, my numbers might be. No, okay, less than that. But they've been hiding out for some time, and they've created their own culture and stuff. And I forgot, the Borg ties in there somehow. So this is what I mean. It gets a little complicated and wonky at times, but the Borg is important to the storyline too, because the Romulans have taken one of the Borg ships, and they are taking the Borgs and kind of making them not part of the collective, or they're no longer part of the collective. They're ex-Borgs and stuff, and somehow, some way that's important to this XBs, and somehow, some way that's important to the overall plot. Basically, this is a story about Romulans hating synthetics and Picard trying to prove once again synthetics matter.
And, it's interesting because you bring up the Borg, because the Borg serve really no purpose.
I agree with you. Yeah.
In the show, and I thought that the end, when the signal went out from the synthetics out into space, I really thought they were reaching out to Borg, and I was really hopeful that would have been the come full circle to the Borg being involved, right? But it wasn't, and I was just so like, well, who are these new synthetic creatures out in space that's somewhere out there? It doesn't make any sense.
No, I agree with you. I think the final episode for sure is a little bit of a hot mess. I think the show overall, though, is a lot better than the last episode. Lets it kind of like it's. So this is a show where I think it's kind of like has like a good. I actually was a fan of the kind of the film, the noir kind of style, like as a detective story, right? Like Picard is trying to put all these pieces together to try to solve this mystery of like what is this conspiracy that has to do with the fact that like synthetics killed everyone on Mars for some reason, right? There's a bigger, higher conspiracy theory that's happening, and that is also part of the reason why Picard had to like resign in disgrace. I think it was disgraceful.
He didn't resign in disgrace.
I am pretty sure it was considered disgrace.
And it's not so much of it. That wasn't so much his deal, like why the synthetics did that.
No, you're right. That was
more Raffi,
yeah.
Raffi, who was trying to figure that out. She was more the conspiracy person on this. His deal was more like, even after 20 years, he's still dealing with the guilt of Data's death. That's still part of his.
That's
trauma.
how the show begins. Yeah.
Right.
And also the trauma of being an ex-Borg.
And
too.
That's true. Yes,
that is something he still holds on to, and this journey that he decides to undertake is basically his last hurrah. My last adventure up in the stars, because he was never meant to be in the vineyards. That was not his thing. That was supposed to be his brother.
Which reminds me, have you guys ever read Ulysses? It's a poem. Not the Odyssey, but there is a poem called Ulysses, and it's this reimagining, right, of Ulysses after his grand adventure, the Odyssey, right? He's been living at home for like decades, and there's this calling out to the sea that he misses, right? And he decides to go on one last grand adventure before his ultimate demise. And I think that's a common story that we see in the Western literature, right? I think one of the major ones that comes to mind is also Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, where it's that storyline, right? He gave up the cape, but he can never really give up being Batman, so like he goes out for like several last hurrahs. That's what Picard was also. It was like kind of this man who is this great adventurer and stuff, and like he has this still calling out there. Like he is always called to adventure. Go on, Lincoln.
I don't know if that's it, but I do know that, for example, the vineyard was painful for him because his family died in a fire.
Yeah.
His family owned the vineyard, and his nephew, who he really considered, you would think that was almost like his son as well.
Renee.
Renee. They all died in the fire. So I think,
wow,
you
Picard
know,
had a hard life.
Yeah, it happened in generations. I think that's when it was revealed.
Yeah. Okay.
There were generations that they all died, and so, I think him coming to the vineyard, was bittersweet. And realizing that with his whole family gone, there's nothing left for him on Earth. All he has is the stars, and so I don't know if it was his idea of just being an adventure, but I just feel like, he felt better in space because that's all he knew. That's all he had left. I think if his family would have survived, he would have been more comfortable being on the vineyard with them. But being that there was no one else left.
Interesting. You think so? I don't know if I agree. I think he would not have. I think he ultimately, at the end of the day, would have still gone on that adventure and stuff. Because I think even like the people, the Romulan refugees that he was helping out, right? Like they kept trying to make it seem like you have this life, and I know it's not enough for you, but like you have this life, you're comfortable, like you are an older man, like you should be retired and like kind of at peace, but he wasn't, and I think it's because of that call of adventure.
It's the same thing that Captain Kirk had. The same thing.
Yeah, it's a very, like I said, it's a common trope that like gets used.
He gave up being admirable.
I think it's beyond just a trope. It talks about the human experience. It's about what it is to get older, to feel like you still matter, that there's meaning and value in your life, that you still could contribute to the world, and also and connecting to the things that you valued and you love.
Wow, it sounds like you're describing Joe Biden to me.
But I agree, Eddie, because that's exactly, and a lot of people who are older probably saw a very deep connection in that. Being on the vineyard is like being in a retirement center, right?
For sure.
Yeah. I'm no longer active, I'm no longer contributing. And my whole life for 50 years, I was saving people. I was like saving the universe, saving the galaxy. And now all of a sudden now I'm left to this, sitting at, tending grapes. So absolutely, Eddie. I think that definitely is what that speaks to.
Let's talk a little bit about these characters that we end up getting introduced to on this new Picard adventure. Nicole, did anyone stand out for you?
To me?
Yeah, like any of these new characters that we've met. I mean, they're new for us. Like for you, they're all like if you were meeting Geordi for the first time again.
Not really. I didn't really like this show, but I guess the one character that I will say is the woman that he goes to pilot the ship.
Rafi.
I did like her in terms of a character that stood out to me, but just full disclosure, as a not Trekkie, doesn't know anything about you guys have thrown around a lot of words that I don't know what they mean. But as a person who just enjoys film and television and looking at it as a one-off, and I think that the fact that it had 10 executive producers and 5 writers every time the show started, it was kind of all over the place for me.
I didn't know it had 10 executive producers.
It had 10.
Wow.
There was this one part where it wouldn't stop. Executive producer this, executive producer that, and it just like kept coming. And I was just like, okay, this is already like a what is they call it? Like a red flag.
Right. Okay. Fair.
I think I should know these things, and that's why it kind of felt like a little slow paced for me. But I also just didn't really enjoy the tone of the show.
So interesting. I don't know necessarily if you did need to know those things, right? Because even me, as someone who was a casual Star Trek fan, at a certain point, I asked Eddie, it's just like, wait, is this like canon? Like, did this like the Mars attack? Did that really happen in the show, or is this like brand new canon and stuff? And I think a lot of the things that ends up getting introduced to the show outside of Data's death is kind of new that they're introducing specifically to the show. Right. So you're not. It feels like you might be at a disadvantage, but the truth is, like, if you're a brand new Star Trek viewer, you might not get as much enjoyment out of this show, but you could probably still follow along because it is pretty much a new story. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I did like follow along, but there were a couple things that I just felt like I wasn't. But for me in general, I didn't enjoy the tone. What I liked about Next Generation from what I saw, like I said before, was that it was like an Adventure of the Week episode. And Picard kind of played like it was trying to be more of an action film, or like take like the tone of an action film and be like a little bit more cynical and like rough around the edges, which I think I understand why they kind of were going for that because, he's got so many demons. Like you guys were saying, like he's going through a lot as a character. And Akiva Goldsman, one of the writers and producers on the show, spoke that they wanted to make it more of a character study. But by doing that, it kind of loses this overall Star Trek feel. I don't know how many other shows were just character studies, but it didn't feel like kind of like this team effort. You said the word noir. It didn't feel like noir because to me, noir is also like, it's cynical, but it's kind of more like shadowy in the way that it's shot. Like I feel like even the way that it was shot, it didn't really like know how it wanted to be taken. Like,
I'll give you that. Maybe noir wasn't the right word. Boilerplate maybe. It was like there was a little bit of a mystery detective like between him and Rafi trying to solve like this conspiracy. That's what ultimately I think boilerplate is a term I should have used, not noir. You're right. Noir is more like the
and just in general. You also said like a Western, like getting a bunch of characters and stuff, and I don't know, and nothing really flowed that well for me.
Okay.
And even I don't know, just like in terms of the story, it was not that easy to. Maybe it was easy to follow. Maybe I just felt like I thought it was very slow paced too.
I would agree with you on that one. The show was itself very slow paced.
So,
but yeah, so Rafi stands out to you. I think Rafi, I would agree with you. Rafi was probably the most fleshed out secondary character of the show.
Yes.
They give her an alcohol problem. She has issue. She has an estranged son.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I also, just one last thing I kind of didn't like was how pretty space looked in this one. One of the things that was nice about Next Gen was that it was a low budget and like things weren't as refined, yet this space looked like so nice. Like
space is
really
beautiful.
But just like the way that when the character in the pilot episode is talking to her mom and you see how like camera phones work in the future and stuff, I'm like, this is too nice. This is like Minority Report nice. This is not Star Trek nice.
I think, yeah. So I, remember when I said that the shows, there's something like kind of whimsical about those 90s like low budget shows where I think now because of CGI, and this is like a complaint that we've had on this podcast several times, but because CGI has made it so much easier and cheaper to do those effects and stuff.
It's a shame. They should just stick to their own formula, like do it in a soundstage in California. Nothing wrong with that.
No, they probably did though, in front of a green screen.
In front of a green screen, but they should have just done it on the set, like on set 39 or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Because then it just doesn't feel like Star Trek anymore. Of course, I'm not a Trekkie. I'm not someone who's watched Star Trek all my life. But from jumping from one to the next, I'm like, this feels so.
But don't
different.
you think it ends up feeling more like the new Star Trek J.J. Abrams movies?
J.J. Abrams? Okay, kind of. Not really. Not for me, at least.
So just to comment on that piece, Star Trek was always supposed to be very nice, very shiny. Everything about Star Trek was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the opposite of Star Wars, which was supposed to be rough, rugged.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't supposed to be buttons. It was supposed to be flat surfaces. Everything was supposed to be very much the way it looked. And so, like, for it to look like, if you watch Star Trek from the beginning all the way to even to Voyager and to Enterprise, you'll see it maintained that just as technology in a real world evolved, it was able to just be a little bit shinier, but the premise was always been the same, where everything was supposed to be nice, clean, organized. That's just how Star Trek always been.
Part of that utopia vision.
Yes, it's always been like that. So I'm only commenting to the point where you're saying how everything looked nice, but that's always been a hallmark of Star Trek. That's why you can't look at it. You can't go back, look at Star Trek original series and look at Star Trek Generations. Their reason why they looked really then was because of just the lack of technology at the time.
Yeah, I think that's actually not even the point of view I'm looking at it. I look at everything like, this is, done to the way that they could in 1966. I think that even if they made it very clean and they made it really refined, but even then I feel like even in the storylines, like, it was more about the story than it was about space, where something about Picard was like, let's just throw this added in bonus too because it could look like super cool. Like, it almost wasn't focused more on making everything look so cool than the story, which is why it's like everything kind of didn't make sense and seemed slow paced because they're more focused on that.
So that's,
in my opinion,
but that's an issue. To me, that's a separate issue, and that's dealing with the writing. but I just want to.
Oh yeah, well I think the ratings are very good in this.
Right, but I just want to address the aesthetics though, just for the viewers. Like the aesthetics has always been that way. That's always been the intent of the aesthetics of Star Trek, where everything is nice, shiny, clean. But then behind the scenes, there was this hidden, whether that's sector. I forgot the name of what's that sector that was
66?
Yeah, something like that.
69.
And then you had the Romulans, and then you had the Cardassians. They all had their hidden backdoor dark spaces that they operated from in this shiny, glamorous world. So it always was the, putting on this shiny, glamorous front where there was a lot of backdoor politics and dark seediness that was going on in the background too. So that's always been a part of Star Trek. This is not to argue your point about it's substituting for lackluster writing, because that's a totally different conversation. But I just want to say that just aesthetically, the aesthetics has always been their thing.
Well, actually, let's talk a little bit about the writing here, because you guys seem to take issues. Lincoln, I happen to know that you are a writer, so you probably you understand story better than I would say. Well, I don't want to say me, because like I understand story too. I wanted to be a writer. No, but let's just get into it. What's it called? What were your qualms with story? Because I have actual qualms less with story, and it's actually more with like decisions that were made that could have, I think, elevated the story a little bit better. But I don't think necessarily the writing itself was awful.
But that is part of writing, right? It's all about the storyline, the plot, and it's almost like you take the easy way out. And it was a lot of times where I felt like they took the easy way out. Okay. One of the glaring things was when a synthetic is able to mind meld with anyone. Like, what the hell was that about?
Oh, okay. So this seems like
that was the worst.
Yeah, I totally had a problem with that.
Okay, so this is like
worst.
Totally had a problem with that.
But it was a Deus Machina moment where it was just like you had to figure out a way to do it, so you just gave the synthetic the opportunity. So for those who don't know, a mind meld is when a person is able to, and I want to be very specific, a Vulcan, because they're the only race that can really do it.
And Vulcan is Spock.
A Vulcan is like Spock or Spock. Is able to touch your mind, touch your head, like, it's like so. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And
my
then
mind
they will
to your mind,
my thoughts to your thoughts. And so they would pretty much create a psychic link between you and them. And they would be able to communicate psychically to you, whether reading your mind or just communicating with you. So it requires very much physical contact. It requires a physical, literal mind, and there's an emotional connection. There's a psychic link. When a robot is able to make a psychic link, it is not factual, because robots do not have a psyche to link.
Interesting.
Well, isn't that the whole argument though about this show that it was trying to make, that these aren't just synthetics, they're actually a higher life form of synthetics?
No, because even if you follow through Star Trek, it was understanding that even Data was evolving, right? Even Data got his emotion chips allowed him to be better than he was, or closer to human. But the reality is, he was still a boundary between human and synthetic. You were still not real. You had a positronic brain, and you still process things as a computer.
So that's the question of Picard. What is real?
But that was too far-fetched.
So the only problem I had with that was when Dr. Soon,
Dr. Soon
makes that comment. Oh, she loves to study Vulcan things. So she's familiar with these Vulcan ways. You should hear her play some Vulcan instrument. So it was like, so for a hobby, she studies Vulcan mind meld, and she can do it.
See, to study the Vulcan mind meld is one thing, but to actually perform it is totally different. That's like a human cannot do it. No, at no point in Star Trek has any other race been able to do the Vulcan mind meld but Vulcans. And all of a sudden now we have a synthetic life form is able to do it. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, see, this is
doesn't make
any sense.
Ultimately, this is the problem with so this is one of the big problems that there are with
even the Romulans, who are a descendant, who come from the same bloodline as Vulcans, could not do a mind meld.
I was speaking. No, I was gonna say no, but this has to be so this is like one of the problems with like reviving like franchises like this. It's well, I guess I don't know. This is so Star Trek, similar to Star Wars, right? They have a fan base, and if you do something that's not in the canon, right? That like kind of offends someone, like you will never hear the end of it. And no, I'm not no shade to you guys. I'm just saying, but no. What I'm just saying is just like this is one of the dangers with like sometimes these type of franchises, right? Where so for me, I'm a Fairweather fan. I didn't even think twice about that. Like I was just like, all right. It was a cheap. I'll give you that. It was a cheap writing device, all right. But the logic that you guys have against it, for me, doesn't. Like I said, I'm a Fairweather fan. I'm not thinking of that. So there's like different levels of how. So I'm sure, Nicole, you're probably looking at this and you're just like, I don't fucking know what's happening. Where me, I'm just like, I know what's happening, but I'm just like, all right, interesting, new, weird, but like, let's see where it goes. And then the real diehard, like the people who actually like have a respect for like the lore, then they're going to be the ones who are going to nitpick that kind of stuff apart. And
well, at the end of the day, the show is made for them.
That's a fair point, right? They're not trying to capitalize on new fans, so there goes my argument.
You do kind of need to. If the show is titled after a character who we've been introduced to in another show, then you do need to stay true to that history and that universe and its rules.
The universe and the rules.
And keep in mind, Star Trek is one of the few franchises that has been able to stick very, very close to canon, from beginning to end. Even the new J.J. Abrams storyline doesn't veer too far off. The way they justify it is through a alternate timeline, because they knew to automatically just change everything without any reasonable explanation would just not be right. Paramount Studios has been, and CBS has been very clear on maintaining the continuity of Star Trek from the very beginning. And so to me, it feels like if this was, I mean, we all got upset when X-Men movies came out, but you know what? It was so many of them just came out that were just so unconnected to the canon, and they revised it that people just gave it, was like, all right, I guess this is how it's going to go. But
I mean, sometimes that tactic wins with Hollywood, where they just beat you. It's just like, just get over it.
Which is fine. Which is fine if that's what you're going to start doing. But Star Trek is a different animal. I mean, Star Trek has. I agree. I mean, I follow a lot of other franchises, and Star Trek is just different from all the others. I mean, it has had fans from the 60s that are still today. It would not be what it is if it wasn't for the fan base. This is not like Marvel, who picks up new fans every generation. This is fans that have been true to canon from, books, encyclopedias, dictionaries have come out all on Star Trek. And for some, Picard, which is based on 3-4 shows prior, to now all of a sudden change or rewrite canon, is just not good writing.
Well, I don't know if they rewrote canon or more introduce an idea, the possibility here.
Okay.
That something besides the Vulcan can do the mind meld.
But that's a big.
And I have even theories about this, but I don't want to talk about that. But getting back more to Picard and, what is it? What is Star Trek now? And what is the Federation now? Like, now we're seeing kind of like the dark side of the galaxy. Because now we're encountering a world where the Federation is not protecting the people there. And people are living in very lawless societies where you reintroduce the character Seventh of Nine as a ranger and a protector.
I will say one thing that I did like about the show was this idea of the mistrust of this government. And
yes,
I think it does. Yeah. That speaks to very, like, now I think from what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's not much questioning of the higher power of, like, say, Starfleet in Star Trek. It's very much like kind of like obedient, like follow orders and do what you're told. Is this, am I correct, Trekkie fans? Is this one of the first times we're actually getting like kind of like not trusting Starfleet, not seeing the darker side of it, and this isn't the first time?
No, there was a few moments, very few moments in Star Trek Next Generation, but there was even more moments in Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
And Deep Space Nine, because of the whole war with the Dominion, and so there was a lot of backdoor deals going on and shadiness going on there. But
well, it wasn't the first time, but you are being lied to.
The character Picard, this would be the first time that he's dealing with all this. By himself.
Yeah.
But
which is
not having the crew, not having his ship, but he's dealing with the brokenness of the Federation and it not living up to the ideals.
That's the thing. So I think Lincoln said this earlier, right? Like they never explicitly say that like the Federation is not the bad guy here. The Romulans are, right? But the Federation here is not the bad guy in the sense of that they are actively doing evil things. It's more like they're turning a blind eye, but they're turning a blind eye because they kind of paid a price when they listened to Picard at one point, right? And they felt that price was too high to pay. Right, so they end up coming around by the end of the series, but like the show never explicitly says that the Federation here was bad. It's more like they're not living up to their high standard that like the previous series have painted them, and I think that was an interesting route to go for the show. They could have explored it a little more, I think, but they still gave for the people who do want, because I think there's a large percentage of the fan base that kind of prefers to see Starfleet being the good guy, and they still got that payoff at the end.
Yeah.
So I think what Picard is moving towards, and this is what you're going to also see in Discovery as well, is that the Federation cannot continue to be the police. It cannot continue to be this utopian for all. And eventually, it just cannot maintain itself. It's grown too big to provide for everyone everywhere. And I think that they're wrestling with that in Picard, that reality, that there's just like, we got to cut our losses some places and we can't save everyone. We can't do everything. We can't be everything to everyone all the time.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing in Discovery, from what I've seen in the trailers and the teasers, is that there is no longer a Federation as we know it in the far future, because it's grown too big to provide this utopia for everyone.
Which reminds me, so Discovery Season 3 is going to be going deeper, further into the future than the series has ever been. But up till then, right now, Picard has been like the latest into the future that we had been to at any point, right? So I think introducing that new conflict for the franchise, which is like where the Federation isn't what it used to be, I think that's an interesting route to go for a franchise as a whole.
Yeah. And I mean, just if you want to relate it to real life, I mean, that's just the reality of everything, right? You can, at some point, you start to make these decisions that you can't save everybody at any point. You can't continue to provide what you've always provided for everyone, especially as you grow, and you're constantly trying to, in your quest to help everyone, you then can silence people too. We've seen that with the Maquis, right, where they're trying to make peace between Cardassians and Maquis all the time, but someone has to be the loser.
I keep hearing Kardashians.
Oh, so Cardassian is just another race of people.
Oh, okay.
Like what we have here on Earth.
Right.
Yeah, there you
go. Burn. So there is one more thing I want to bring up, though, before we actually kind of do wrap up the episode. In terms of writing, I think here's where I think the biggest flaw for the show comes from. And mind you, I'm like I said, I'm a Fairweather fan. I think the show for me was fine. Wait, Eddie, where are you going?
No, he's done with this episode.
Right, he's finished. He's done.
All right, but my biggest, I think one of my biggest qualms with the show comes from the very, very end, where Picard. And this is a spoiler alert, guys. Sorry, but Picard dies by the end of the series, and then through some like logic, right, he's brought back to life as like kind of a golem, right?
No, wait. There's not logic.
No, you're right. There was logic to it. Like they introduced this idea already in the series, but for me, ultimately, it kind of felt like a cop out. Like I think the show would have been successful as a swan song, just letting him die, and that is fine. Like there was no need to like make him well, basically he's a synthetic now.
Yeah, it was no point in making. It was no point in making him that. He could have just lived his normal life out. They could have just played it where he just grew of old age. They did not have to make him die, only to put him in a synthetic body, just so he can live another 3 years. Like it just doesn't make any sense.
They put him in a synthetic body that will age and deteriorate still.
Right.
So it's just like, okay, cool. So
what was the point?
What was the point? Interesting.
It didn't make any sense.
It wasn't just to have a season 2. They just kind of like
according to the writers, they said that they always wanted him to die, but come back because that would be closing the chapter. I'm just like, when you die in real life, you die. There's no point.
Seriously,
you don't get a chapter after that
unless you're Buffy. Unless you're
so
Buffy.
fantasy.
Unless you're what?
Buffy.
Unless you're.
She died twice.
But here's the thing.
And like, Xena died a bunch of times. Sorry.
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart is literally old.
Power.
And he can die at any moment.
For sure.
And so it defeats the whole purpose of trying to extend a character who will literally die and that you will not be able to replace with a substitute. It just does not.
Yeah.
The whole process. He could have had this terminal illness, and this terminal illness could have just kept on to every season until he literally dies. Like
for sure.
It did not need to be changed into a synthetic. It just because it leaves the door open and say, well, he won't age, and that we can save him again. Which, if the character truly does die, if Patrick Stewart does die, then his character really does die.
Not that I hope that Patrick Stewart dies, but I'm just saying it's just. I was gonna say like I hope like if it happens like in this middle of season 2 and they had to go like Plan 9 from outer space, I get like someone just covering.
It just did not make any sense.
That'd be great, yeah. Patrick Stewart in season 2, just like that.
Yeah, that'll be the season that you love, Nicole.
That I would love that. I think based on I didn't finish the show and it's actually been a while. I rewatched the pilot with my girlfriend, but I think that the show had a lot of nice ideas. I just think that the execution kind of wasn't there.
Yeah.
I think that one of the best things that the show had going for it was kind of like this existential crisis that Picard was going through. You know, so much suffering, so much trauma, and with his own personal redemption that he needed to go through. It just got lost in this whole like secret Romulan agent, 2 synthetic daughters. I don't know. Like, I kind of would have liked it if it was more of a true character study without all this added stuff that he had to do and travel to the Borg. I don't know.
If each episode he's having dinner with one of his old like fleet members and stuff, and they're just like discussing.
Yeah, and they're just like having dinner and
high-end philosophy of like space travel.
I feel like what it was trying to get across, it didn't necessarily. But you know, if you look really hard, you will find it. But I don't know, it just kind of wasn't there. Also, not a Trekkie fan. There was a lot of things that I do think I missed, and I just also didn't overall enjoy the filming of it.
I will say this much. I think where the show delivered for me the most impactful punch was when they kill off Data. They killed off one character for permanently, and that was Data. And I think the reason that was such a successful moment in the show is because media as of late has been exploring this idea of like, what does it mean to be alive, right? We talked about it with Dracula, where when Dracula realized that he's immortal, there's kind of like life is meaningless, right? We've seen it. I think The Good Place is another one that explores that, right? Like an afterlife that's eternal is, again, meaningless. It becomes boring. It becomes stale. This show kind of does that too with Data, right? Because like his subconscious is like still out there permanently just floating, and he wanted to die. And the reason he wanted to die was because even if he knows he's gonna die, that gives like his final remaining moments like purpose, because he knows there's an end coming. And
that's interesting.
It's one of those moments, and you know, I think, like I said, media has been kind of starting to explore this idea more and more, and that's a fascinating idea to come with, because life does, especially nowadays during the quarantine, life can feel meaningless, you know? And, you know, granted, the show came out right obviously before the quarantine, but I'm just saying it's just there is this idea of like, what does it mean to be alive? And the show, for all its flaws, I think does explore that through Data. And my complaints about the final episode aside, I think that's where I think it delivered the most impactful punch.
So you think it did kind of deliver on its existential dread overall?
Towards the end, yes, towards the end. For that specific theme that I was exploring, right? And other things, like I said, it kind of like meandered. It had like its highs, it had its lows, but for the most part, I thought it was an enjoyable show. But that's just my thing. I don't know how you guys felt about that. Otherwise, how you guys felt about, I think it seems like we're all upset that like Picard didn't die, but like, what about Data dying?
Well, he already died when the show opened, so.
Well, he dies again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very touching moment. It was a very emotional moment for many people. I think, I critiqued the show, but I think the show was good overall. Mm-hmm. I thought it was great. You know what it was? It was a fan-made show. It was a show made for fans. It was a show made for Trekkies. It was a show made for nostalgic purposes. Like, it really, to bring all the old characters back, to the possibility that more old characters come back. It was really cool. And that's what I loved the most about it. It did have a lot of the writing flaws that we mentioned, but sending Data off for the very last time was really great. Seeing Riker in the captain's seat was really great. Seeing Riker and even Deanna Troi together, finally, of all the movies and all the shows we've seen, was really great. To see 7 of 9 come back, I thought that was just, Jerry Ryan. It was always, it was always questionable what she could ever do with Star Trek as just the Borg, but it was great how they made her into a ranger, and it was really good. So,
and I want to let's shout out Jerry Ryan, who has aged fantastically. She looks great, like just crazy how it doesn't look like she's aged much. Hollywood, man, Hollywood.
And she did a really good job bringing. And then Acheb, you guys don't know, but in Picard, she sees the young boy on the table, and they're doing an operation on him, and they pull out his eye and all that. That young guy is actually from Star Trek Voyager. He was a rescued Borg. Yeah, he was one of the Borg children. And so it was one of her children. And so that's what kind of put her on this path, by the way. If you didn't notice that, that's what put her on this path in the show.
Yeah, so she was betrayed by her lesbian lover.
Right. And that's so I think, bringing back the old characters.
Lesbians, am I
right? Bringing back the old characters and giving them new life, to me, as a Trekkie, was very, very important, and very, very good, and very well done. And I'm very thankful for that as a Trekkie, to see that.
This show was meant for you.
Yeah, it really was.
Actually, so that answer is actually, you prematurely answered the question that you knew was coming, Lincoln, which was, do you think this show was needed? And it sounds like you think, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What do you think?
I think the show is needed. The premise, I'm going to say, I think the show is needed. And not Picard, but the idea of bringing these old characters back is needed. The idea of bringing these old characters back is needed. I think it probably could have been done better than what they did in Picard, because of the writing and all the other issues that we talked about. But I think they really did a good job in bringing all the characters back, and I think it really was needed because people did miss these characters. People didn't want to just see characters that they've grown attached to, over a course of 7 years or sometimes shorter, just all of a sudden they just didn't see them again. After Insurrection, there was no more movies. So it wasn't like we got to see cast from Deep Space Nine, cast from Voyager, cast from Enterprise ever again. Once the shows ended, that was it. The only characters we got to see over and over again was original series and Next Generation. We got to see them continuously. We did not get to see the others again. So I thought that for that purpose only, it was needed to see them again.
Which reminds me, Nemesis. So it was the last movie that came out, and then it bombed. And it was such a bad experience for Patrick Stewart that he vowed he would never do the character ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And CBS had been trying to do this series for some time now, and they kept going to him with different iterations of the script. And it was finally this storyline that kind of captivated him enough. I don't know. That's what he says. Whether or not they offered enough money, that's a whole.
It's probably that.
I mean, the story is good. I just think that, Nicole said it, is just the execution of it was not that good. The story, the concept, the idea, I thought was nothing wrong with it. And the way they even introduced the characters wasn't really wrong. I just think there was a lot of missed opportunities and a lot of opportunities and a lot of things done wrong.
Yeah.
That kind of made it bad. But
here's hoping for season 2 to be better.
Yeah.
Well, it's got Whoopi, so
Whoopi will be there, and he won't listen to her again.
But I'm excited for Discovery, because I love Discovery.
It sounds like Discovery is super worth checking out, actually.
I love it. I love it. You talking about multicultural cast? It is very multicultural cast, and everybody gets their shine. I mean, you don't maybe not seen it, but Tilly, I thought that she was a nobody in the beginning, but then she becomes this really important character. Which she gets on my nerves, by the way. But
are there homosexuals?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
that's
now,
important.
Now,
Yes. The married couple.
Two.
Oh, that's okay. Because it's funny, right?
And a Puerto Rican.
Yep.
There's Puerto Ricans in the
Who's
future.
a doctor?
That's good. I thought they'd be Americans by then. But...
Black Puerto Rican doctor.
Okay.
Who's married to a white male engineer.
Oh. Okay. Actually, now I remember the character that we're talking about. Okay.
Wait, you don't remember how pissed I was?
Yes, I do remember. Okay. Don't spoil it. We're not talking about that show. I don't want to spoil it to anyone who hasn't watched it. It might be okay. But all right, cool. Eddie, do you think Star Trek Picard was needed?
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Elaborate.
Yes.
Duh.
Well, similar to what Lincoln said, you do connect with these characters. You watch the story. You go on the journey, and this is your opportunity to revisit them again, to see what's happened. It's 20 years later. How have they grown? How did they change? Where are they at now? I'm interested. And Picard gives us the opportunity to explore another aspect of the Federation and in this universe. And I think the themes that we didn't get a chance to discuss about Picard, because it'd just be another episode of this podcast, but would be about the idea of family and brokenness and being okay with your brokenness. And
okay.
Those are the things that I really got out of the show. So I was very happy for it. Actually, I really liked it. But I do see, I understand where you guys are coming from with your own
media criticism,
mind meld, and Picard dying but not dying. But
that will be a grave sin again. That's like a huge mark against the show. But I don't think it should detract from overall. I think the show itself. It's that was just one poor execution. Nicole,
I'm looking forward to the second see what they take it from there.
Me too, and I was excited about every episode, to see every episode. I have I have a lot of critiques because I'm looking at it with different lenses. As a writer, I see it through one way.
Yeah.
But as a Trekkie, I see it another way, and I echo everything that Eddie said. And I was really, really excited to see the show, and I really hope that the show continues on a second season. I just hope it gets better, for especially for the non-Trekkies there, that it satisfies them in some way, because I do think that it's an opportunity to really grow the fan base as well. So I hope they don't miss that.
I would agree. Nicole, as the non next generation watcher, what are your thoughts there?
The non-Trekkie, I don't know if I can really answer the question as to the actual Picard thing as to whether or not it was needed. But what I can say is that as someone who just knows what it's like to be a fan of something and to have been deprived of something for so long. Who doesn't love a good encore? Later on this year, Disney Plus is going to be reviving the Muppets, and that alone is just like sending my heart ablaze. And I know, just hearing you talk about seeing some of these characters, like the ones that didn't have movies that you hadn't seen for 20 years and how much that meant to you, that is something that our pop culture and these shows, they mean so much to us. And these franchises too have become so much to us in our society that it is like seeing your old friend again. And that, I think, just with every passing year and with every added franchise, just becomes stronger and stronger. So I think there's just something really sentimental about it.
And just in general, I mean, I don't think people realize the impact. I mean, we talk about it, but Star Trek has had a significant impact on our world in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, really more so than any other franchise on the planet. I mean, the technology we have today, scientists who developed it will say they were inspired by Star Trek.
Yes.
I mean, they literally said, I made this because I watched Star Trek.
There was the History Channel, or I think, had a whole show based off of it, right? Like Star Trek did it first, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's Star Trek is one of those series that I think that it really is bigger than most franchises is, and I hope that the writers and the producers really work harder at Picard, because we want people to. It's very important that people understand the power that the franchise has and the influence it has had over our society.
Well, they have a new showrunner for season 2. I don't know if you guys know this, but the person who ran the first season is gone. So there will be a completely different person heralding the next one. So
was it drama?
No, he's working on another project.
Yeah, he left to go on other projects. There probably was trauma. I want to know the tea.
I want the tea too.
What about you, Rolando?
No, I think so. One of the things, I guess, doing the show, right? Like, Hollywood goes one way or another, or possibly 3 ways of going about it, right? It's either a remake, a reboot, or a revival. Like this falls under a revival category, right? And I actually think sometimes the revival is more preferred than a straight up remake or a reboot, because the revival gives us a good revival will feed off of the nostalgia, and this show does a lot of that, where we see every episode, if not most episodes, you get a character from the original run or one of the other franchises in the Star Trek lore. And if you're a fan, that just really excites you. And at the same time, a good revival will capitalize not just on the nostalgia, but kind of decide to go introduce new things. And sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. This show kind of had its moments that I don't think were successful, but I also do think that, like, introducing, for example, the Federation is kind of like this flawed, overarching body of government is more realistic than that utopia that Gene Roddenberry had envisioned. And it could be just our cynicism from just the day and age that we're living in right now, right? Like, you had to also keep in mind, like, the absolute cynicism that we have towards a body of government as of right now, as myself as a liberal, just myself as an American citizen, like, that all translates into when I'm watching this show and I see that, like, Captain Picard, the captain that I remember being the most idealistic, and he not seeing eye to eye with, like, that body of government. I'm just thinking, it's just like, all right, well, I know how you feel, man. Look at who my president is. And so I think that's why a revival was successful, and I think it was needed, because it kind of gives you, as both Eddie and Lincoln had just said, it kind of gives that fan service, but at the same time, it's trying to introduce new things. And that is ultimately what I think is a good revival, right? Where you can like give fans what they want, while still me, who's, like I said, a Fairweather fan, I can still enjoy the show and be like, okay, these are interesting things they're introducing, and I'm intrigued. I actually, watching the show, I didn't think I was going to be as excited as I was for, like, each episode to come out, because I think for me the storyline was overall good. Did I like Dodge as a character? No, but
Dodge.
I think Dodge was the worst. who is a synthetic, right? But like she fell in love way too quickly with the Romulan, in my opinion. But
dreamy eyes.
But I think for me, it might have been actually kind of like for the first half of the show was I kind of like each week was finding a new crew member. And then like the second half of the show was like kind of like trying to resolve this problem that they have. So yeah, I think it was for me as a revival, it was just successful. And you know, I think similar to like when we did what's it called? What's that? The Dark Crystal, which was a revival.
Yeah.
Not a reboot, where again, though I'm starting to think that maybe revivals are kind of the route that I'm kind of leaning towards Hollywood going, right?
Yeah.
Where take the old franchise and stuff and just kind of like breathe new life into it without necessarily redoing everything. Because sometimes these franchises, they're successful for a reason. You know, Picard his idealism is what makes Picard so successful. They did not take that away. He might have been a little disheartened, but he was like still that idealistic character that he always was in the series.
True.
You know?
I am truly on board with you, Rolando. I think Hollywood definitely needs to do more revivals and less reboots. And I look to the X-Men, the Marvel X-Men franchise as one of those. They should never have rebooted them. They should have just revived it and done its service, done the canon service. I mean, they truly dismantled that, and I just thought that they truly did a disservice to 50 years or plus of history. They just did it damage, and I just, I'm very heartbroken by that. So that's why I kind of like Star Trek, because they have never really done a reboot of all the shows, of all their shows. They've never done a reboot. They always, and that's very, from a writing perspective, is very difficult for you to take something that has been established, has been cemented, and then try to make something new out of it.
Yeah.
How do you make a new race when you have all these other histories that you have to take into account? It's very, very difficult to do. So I do give it to the writers of Star Trek, of every episode, of every season, that they've done a really good job of staying true and just adding to the canon and not really redoing everything. Because even J.J. Abrams' version, he tried to do it in a way that both fans and new people can buy into it.
Yeah.
So I respect it from the commercial perspective. A lot of people wasn't happy on it, if Trekkies weren't too happy with it, but I understood it and I can respect it. And the way he did it was a respectable way of doing it. But even still, when he did that, he still stuck to very core principles of Star Trek, very core principles of even the characters that was established. I mean, he did not remake Kirk. Kirk was still Kirk. He did, of course, different things. It was a totally different storyline, but Kirk was still Kirk. And so that was very important in the Star Trek continuum, that when they write these, they really do a really good job of reviving and not rebooting.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, that might just be a good thing for Hollywood to at least listen when it comes to Picard. But I don't know, guys. You tell us what you think, right? Did you guys watch Picard? Did you guys grow up watching Star Trek The Next Generation? Let us know. Where can they let us know, Nicole?
You can shoot us an email, remakesrebootsrevivals@gmail.com. Or if you'd like to hit us up on social media, we have a Facebook, facebook.com/remakesrebootsrevivals. We have an Instagram @remakesrebootsandrevivals. We have a Twitter, but don't hit us up on that. I don't even know what the handle is. What is it, Rolando?
Remakes Podcast.
Remakes Podcast.
Yeah. We also actually now have an official website. We are now officially www.remakesrebootsrevivals.com. And you can check out all our old episodes. So
yes, you can. And we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're on everything. So give us a hoot. And we have a YouTube page where these videos will be up.
Yes. And maybe Scooby-Doo, if we could get it to work.
Hopefully Scooby-Doo, yeah.
I'll take ownership on that one.
So wait a minute, does that mean I'm going to be a YouTube star?
Oh,
possibly.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, Lincoln, where can people find your, where can people reach out for you? To you?
Oh.
For you?
I'm on Instagram, FCS Chief. That's F as in Frank, C as in Charlie, S as in Sand Chief. That's on Instagram. And then I have farcornerstudios.com. That's FARCORNERSSTUDIOS.com. That's where you can learn more about what I do and the comic books that I write. And then Twitter, it's again FCS Chief. So
awesome.
Great, cool. All right, well, I think that is it. I'm ready to be beamed to bed.
What time is it?
It is 11:30
on the East Coast.
They're not gonna clean your room.
So
yeah, seriously,
Nicole, I think with that we're done.
I think we are. Lincoln, it's always a pleasure. You're definitely going to be back for another episode.
You are officially.
I enjoyed this.
You are officially the guest star who's been on the most.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. I'm very humbled by this.
Oh no, for sure. I mean, thank you for enlightening us on the Star Trek lore that we didn't know about.
Yeah, seriously. I wonder what this episode would have been like without you.
a lot of Googling.
Eddie's a Trekkie too.
No,
you know,
I stepped back. I was
he
like, this is the history teacher.
Like,
and it was the wormhole here to the camouflage, man. And the Kardashians came. They were fabulous.
Oh man.
Well, with that said,
until
Nicole,
next time.
Yes, stay original.